I think I'm at the end of the line for this blade. I've sharpened it, must be, I don't know, 10 or 12 times already. And the teeth are starting to get a little bit small on there, so I don't think I can get any more sharpenings out of this one. This video, I want to make this thing right here. This is my mini table saw sled. I made this a while ago, and I've used it in lots of videos. Originally when I made it, I didn't think I would use it that much. I did it basically on a whim. I just thought, you know, maybe this would be handy. So I made it, and I've been using it ever since. Every time I need to make a fine cut at 90 degrees on the table saw, something that would be a little bit too dangerous to do on the miter saw, I do it on the table saw using this thing here. Now, I had a few people say when I mentioned this that, you know, you can do that with this thing here, but mine fits in a T slot here, and I find that really inconvenient. Also, it doesn't straddle the blade like this thing does. I really like that about this, is that, you know, you have the ability to hold the part on both sides of the blade. Also, it took no time at all to make, and it's made basically from scraps. I use plywood for this one, Baltic birch, and that's what I would recommend. But this one I'm going to make from 100% from solid wood. I've got a piece of maple here, and I'm going to get the entire sled from this single piece. The original was 12 inches long to begin with, but I cut the ends off here to work with something special I was doing on a table saw. But the new one, I want to make that 12 inches long again, so I'll just trim off the end of this piece here on the miter saw. The first two parts that I'm going to make are these two runners that fit in the miter slots on the saw. I got my block of wood here. I'm going to rip 7/8 of an inch off the edge of that. And then I can cut those down to 3/4 of an inch, creeping up on the cut so that it fits nicely in the miter slot. Make sure there's no dust in there. And now that it fits in the slot nicely, drop it in, make sure it's all the way down. Then I'll take my freakishly short pencil and mark on the side here where I need to cut it off. I cut out the other one, and that fits down the other slot like that. You can cut these a bit shallower so they don't bottom out in the slot, but having them flush with the top like this makes it easier for assembly right now. When I get the next parts cut, I can glue them straight down to that without having to shim them up. The next two parts that I need to make are the base and the fence part, and I'm going to cut both of those from this block right here. I'm going to set my saw to split this down the middle into two boards. I'm going to raise my blade up till it's a little past halfway. I'm going to cut this in two passes. The fence on the original is 2 inches tall. I don't see any reason to change that. So I'll make the one on the new one that width as well. I got my fence set to 2 inches, and I'll just cut this first piece off here. I ran a bead of glue along the front edge of the base here, and I'm going to glue the fence to that. I want to make sure that it's flush on the bottom. Flush on the end is important too, but not critical. But flush on the bottom is very important. To keep these lined up, I'm just going to drive a couple of nails near the end so that they're well out of the cutting path. And I can just get a couple of clamps on there, squeeze it tight together, and wait until the glue dries. I gave the glue about an hour to dry on this. I've moved my fence over to use it as a guide to square, actually I turn it around, to square this part to the thing here. If that goes up tight against that, the end of this is cut square, so that'll make this square to the blade. So to glue it onto the runners, I'm going to use epoxy. I've got some mixed up here. I'm using epoxy for two reasons. First of all, it's kind of cool here in my shop, and also the epoxy will set up in about 5 minutes, so I'll be able to put screws in, and that will help to secure these in place. Well, I've got it all lined up and pushed up tight against the fence. I just used my small square here just to check to make sure it is and it looks good. Now all I need to do is just wait a few minutes until the epoxy sets up. I gave it long enough for the epoxy to harden. Now I've taken it out again, and what I want to do is add a screw to each side, and what that'll do is it'll make it tougher. In case it falls on the floor, it's less likely to break these runners off. Now that that part is finished, I've got just one other thing I need to do with it, but I need to make the first cut before I do that. If you look back at the original, you can see I've got a block of plywood on here that covers where the blade comes through the back of the fence, and that's a good idea for safety. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I made that cut so that I can line up these two blocks right over where they go, and I'll glue those in place and clamp them down.